So excited to have Dan on the show with us tonight because Dan is a master sales trainer and he's been implementing sales techniques and helping companies either manage their sales staff or either help them with sales training for over 40 years. And anyway, I'm excited about this, and I know this isn't completely direct marketing related, but it is in so many ways. And what I find interesting is the way Dan goes about qualifying people and eliminating people to get to the people that are saying yes. And it's so fundamentally based on direct response and the way direct marketers are hyper targeting who their initial prospects are and then leading them through the sales process. Dan comes in at the end of this a lot of times and he's able to close people. So if it's a higher ticket product or if that you're trying to sell, a lot of direct marketers will have sales teams that will actually call in and talk with the prospect, talk with the customer to see if what their actual interest is to try to close that product. So that's the value Dan brings, and I'm excited about this because he's developed an entire system for willing. He calls it willing to buy, but he's going to explain this to you and how you can use sales to go in and actually help close more people with higher end products if you're selling them, or just whatever product you are. You can add this to your marketing mix at the end of it. And so with that, I want to introduce you to Dan Schulteis. And Dan, welcome to the Direct Marketing Superstar Conference. We're excited to have you. And just tell us a little bit about how you got into sales and like what led you to Willing to Buy and like how this whole thing came to be. So.
Well, thank you very much, Charles. I'm really grateful and honored to be on this Superstar Conference. Like you said, probably in a direct marketing conference, the early heavy lifting comes from targeting and connecting with your final purchaser. However, as you've told me and as I've experienced, at the end of that chain, a lot of companies have to engage a human being with that identified contact. And so what I found is, and I'll begin in a moment to go into my background, is most of everybody's competitors, biggest competitor is the same. It isn't another company. It's a non-decision. So most people who go through develop contacts and that sort of thing wind up working with people who never come to a decision. That's been my experience. I started out a long time ago, as you can see, with the gray on the head and no hair. I often say after 40 years of sales management, and sales training, I'm kind of scar tissue from neck to ankle. So everything I'm talking about here is fundamentally something I learned on the trial and error streets. I actually started out with IBM in 1967, believe it or not, and I started out as a techie, and after 2 years I switched over to sales. I never really wanted to be in sales, so I was always going up, and when people said they want to buy, I would thank them and say, but why would you want to buy from me in essence? So at the very inception of my sales career, I began asking people why would they want to buy from me this product now? And what I began to craft without knowing it is a mechanism that lets them reflect on why they did want to buy now and from me and this product. And I began to get a greater context and avoided, because of my approach to sales, maybe because of my insecurity, I've avoided the trap that a lot of salespeople fall into, to get very quickly to the solution and to ask questions only to fill out the requirements to be able to craft a proposal. So I sold for 10 years that way, and I sold different sizes, computers, small, medium, large, all the way back then from ones that went from $50,000 up to ones that went to $4 or $5 million. So I was dealing with small, medium, large companies. After about 10 years, I took a promotion and wound up as a sales manager in Indianapolis. I had 7 single male salespeople, all of which were full of vinegar and thought the world of themselves, and all of them had 25 prospects. I chased my tail for the first 3 to 4 months, trying to keep up with their perception of what was going to close. And I was horrible at it, because they would convince me that something was going to close, that the prospect was going to buy. And 80% of the time it didn't. Something always changed. Something always got elongated. They found out at the very end they didn't have enough money. So rather than drive myself crazy, I just thought, how in the world do I get to the essence of whether somebody's going to buy or not? Because the mechanics of putting together the proposal is only one component of really the sales process. It's how much does that person want to buy, and how capable are they, after they want to buy, of getting the decision made in their company.
Right.
So with that, I developed something called Willing to Buy. It was a framework that I questioned my salespeople and was able to filter through prospects and get a higher close rate.
So with Willing to Buy, so as you're developing this, so you've told me in the past, often your sales training, like you were doing this, and next thing you know, you're promoted and you're managing multiple salespeople. And so that's how this whole system came to be, is just for means of you being able to manage what they were doing, as you're saying. So talk about Willing to Buy. Like, I know it's got 4 parts to it. So
Yep.
the first part of it, what's the first part of it, and talk to us about it. So.
Yeah, it has 4 components, and by the way, I don't have with me, so I don't know at the end of this I can run real quick and show you a copy. I actually have a hard copy of the book that is being published as we speak this month. But Willing to Buy is a question. What I call it, it's a questioning framework for effective closing. That's what Willing to Buy is. It's made up of 4 components, and the first 2 components help the customer assess their urgency to make this decision.
Right.
The second 2 components help you assess with them their ability to get it pushed through their business. So let me go back. The first 2 components of the first component is Willing to Buy. So the whole framework's called Willing to Buy, but it comes from the first component. What Willing to Buy is a questioning approach that helps determine what's the vested interest in your contact getting this decision made. What's in it for him or her? What's the impact on them? What's the pain avoidance? What's the award they'll get? The reason for that is, if that is strong and occurs, they will be your champion to get this decision made. So it's called Willing to Buy.
Okay.
Do you have a question on that?
No, go ahead. Or go ahead.
The second component is Justification Evident. Justification Evident, or JE, the initials, is the organizational component. It's what most prospects say to their salespeople who come in about why they want to make a decision. So the first 2 components, Willing to Buy and Justification Evident, are components that you can ask questions of your prospect about why this is the time and why this is urgent. It comes from the viewpoint that a lot of salespeople assume just because somebody asks for a proposal, asks for a solution, that the problem they're trying to solve is urgent enough for them to solve it now. These 2 questioning components help you assess, while you're getting requirements, how urgent it is for this person. I want to insert here, no salesperson can make somebody be more urgent than they are.
Right. That's internal, as far
it's
as
internal, and this helps that internal urgency.
And it helps the person selling determine what that motivation is, as far as, you know, is it a 10 on the motivational chart where they have to have this by 10 days, 15 days, yesterday, you know, or is it something they're looking at 6 months down the road? And that affects where you are in the sales cycle.
Right. Well, let me give you an example that's a silly example. But let's say we were selling somebody a diet and exercise program.
Okay.
And we told them, and they said, yes, I want to do it. I really want to do it. I've always wanted to do it. And we start telling them about our exercise program and the cost and everything. Unless we ask them what their motivation is, unless we ask them, geez, why would you want to do it now? We have no idea whether this person is merely trying to lose 20 or 30 pounds and they've been trying to lose it for 20 years, or whether they've gone to the doctor and he's told them they've got to lose 20 or 30 pounds or they won't live another 2 years. I'm not trying to be ominous about it, but when somebody says, I want to have this, I have to have this problem solved, instead of saying I can solve it, what I coach people do, and Willing to Buy helps them, is you want to say, thank you very much for sharing that. Why would you want to have that solved now? Then when they answer that question, you can assess from their own words the level of urgency for them.
Right.
The same goes for organization. If they say, we've got to have this done for our company. If you say something like, or else what? It leads them very gently to tell you, or else what? They might say something like, we just have to have this done. We just have to. And and you say, or else what? And they give you no reason, you begin to realize they may be just searchers. Some salespeople call them tire kickers. They may be just searching for options and not ready to buy. But if they say, we are losing money and we may have to lay people off in 6 months if we don't solve this problem, you now see the urgency organizationally for them.
Right.
So those two components. I'll stop now. You may have some questions or clarification on that.
Well, what I want to do is, with Willing to Buy, with the first part of it, all right, let's talk about that more. So that's kind of the pre-qualification part of this whole entire process. That helps you determine where they are. So it's the prelude to the next three parts of it, if I understand.
Yeah, and it's most elusive. You're exactly right, but it's also the most elusive because you have to go at it gently, because a lot of times people are hesitant to talk about their personal reasons, or maybe have forgotten their personal reasons. But you're exactly right. You have to look at all these components in parallel, not sequentially. But if you can determine the Willing to Buy early, you know whether this person has a vested interest in getting this done.
So give us some examples of, so for Willing to Buy, like if we're trying to implement this, or give us some examples of how somebody would go about, like you've given us like the overall framework of what that Willing to Buy section is, but give us more examples of like how somebody would go about it, or just more details about it, I guess is where I'm going.
Sure. It's about assessing whether their discomfort with their current situation is high enough in how they communicate with you that would motivate them to change. Because as many of us have heard, the pain of staying the same has to be greater than the pain of changing, or none of us change the status quo.
Okay, so give us some sample questions that you would ask in this phase of the whole process.
Well, okay, I'll ask you this. Just like give me a direct marketing product that in your mind you would think someone on this broadcast might wind up having to have a conversation with a person.
Okay.
Just a product. What do you think?
So say we're doing marketing coaching on this, for instance. The product we're selling is coaching for marketing help. That would be something that somebody may be interested in. Okay. So
let's say we've gone through that. We've identified with your great and all the talent you've had on this and the experts you had on your Superstar conference, so that we actually have somebody and then we've got them on the phone. One of the questions we might ask is, well, we understand you're interested in coaching, and we're just following up from our previous conversations. and see your interest. Let's say they say, oh, I'm really interested. I'm really very interested. And you could say, well, that's great. Would you mind telling me what brought you to that interest? And they say, oh, I've always been interested in this. I've always been interested. I've always wanted to improve myself. And I've always been interested in coaching. What you like to say, well, so that's exciting. How long have you been wanting to do this? Oh, at least 5 to 10 years I've been doing that. A very logical question, Charles, is, well, that's interesting. What might make you do something today rather than 5 years ago?
Right, right.
The answer is, you're not forcing them to give you an answer, but the answer they give you indicates how urgent it is. They might say, I've lost a lot of my clients. I'm a coach myself. I need help because it's fundamental to my business, and my cash flow has gone down dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see. So what's precipitated that and that sort of thing, and then you get into the discussion of the why or wherefore. That's somebody who might have a willingness to buy because they have an external pressure on them. Somebody who wouldn't, you might say, oh, well, how come now? I just think it's time, they say. You say, oh, I understand that. Would you mind sharing why it wasn't time last year or the year before that? They'll say, I don't know, it's just time to me. If they cannot give you any reasons beyond it's just time, then you can begin to assess the urgency to make the decision isn't there, but the urgency, but the wanting to talk about making the decision is. So you as the salesperson then realize the second person probably isn't going to buy. You're not discourteous, but you want to get off the phone with them because there are other people out there who are like the first person who have an urgency.
Right. So how important, when you're questioning, when people will reference deadlines? I know in direct marketing we use deadlines to motivate action, and then also so we can measure a response.
Sure, sure.
So how important is conveying that want, need, or desire for the person to have your product? How important is that deadline in this whole process?
Excellent question, Charles. I think it's a pivotal point because what you should do, if I can use a physical example, you're staking out an expectation. So you have to ask them, if it's that urgent, do they have an idea when they would like to have this happen? When they would like to make this decision? They're liable to say something all in 90 days. Because most prospects, if all of us have been selling, will give you some time frame. The key question to ask them is, what happens if you don't make that decision in 90 days? That's all. What happens if you don't? If their answer is, well, I just have to make it, the response should be, or else what? If they get perturbed at you, if they say to you, don't worry about it, I just have to make it, again, there's not an urgency there. There's a talking there. If they say, I've got to make it because, in point of fact, I've got an operation coming up for my child, I've got some tremendous expenses that are going to come due, and I have to get it going, and 90 days is about my window to get it done. So it's a date future, a date, an estimate of a date future, Charles, and I thank you for that question, allows you to frame your questions to see if there's an urgency and it's time-based. Otherwise, a non-time-based urgency never really closes.
Right.
It's like always wanting to lose weight.
Right. So the other part of this, Dan, is with direct marketing, we're using a lot of its pain points, a lot of its fear, frustration, a lot of its saving time. You know, when I'm writing copy for sales letters, a lot of times it's not all fear-based. Some of it's saving time and popularity. I mean, there's all sorts of different emotions that I find in copywriting that people respond to. So what are some of the emotions that you find that signal to you to take people to justification?
It's a discussion on what their current situation is that's become intolerable for them not to change it. So I believe your direct marketing process is exquisite. I believe it does tap into people, but of course they don't want, and they may, depending on the product, they may buy right from that. But if the end point of the product is to have the voice-to-voice conversation with the person that is identifying themselves, then to me you have to re-inventory their reasons to change.
Okay.
Not the advantages of your solution.
Right.
And that's what Willing to Buy does.
So it's the heart of why they want to do this, and
yes.
what their emotions are as to.
And also, if I may add, the impact of not changing. So a lot of people will want to quit doing this, change this, move, buy a new car, change their home, buy coaching, buy a training program. That isn't what motivates them. The other side of the equation is what's going to motivate them to stop what they're doing now. So a part of Willing to Buy is the impact of not changing their current condition. And what happens is most prospects are used to people trying to sell them and convince them, and they have a very subconscious resistance to that, or they give you platitudes. Oh, that's very interesting. When you start asking questions about why would you want to ever change what you're doing now to move to something else, that is such an unsuspected question that you usually get the essence of what they're thinking, or you've caused them to reflect on what really is bothering them now. And that's the essence of uncoupling the inability or the resistance to change.
Okay. So as we move into justification evident, talk to us more about what that process is. And
it's actually the same process, only it's objective and it's more business oriented. Because for instance, let's say somebody has if you're dealing with a business and they have problems collecting their bills. Mm-hmm. Well, how long have they had problems collecting their bills? If they tell you it's for 5 to 7 years, then they've been living with it for 5 to 7 years. What about your conversation today? Organizationally, does that organization have to change what it's been living with for 5 to 7 years? Willing to Buy and justification evident are actually the same process. Willing to Buy deals with the individual, and therefore you have to be much more gentle about it, because people get their hearts and soul in that, and they don't necessarily want to share all that, or they don't even realize what they've been dealing with. Justification evident goes down the same path, except it's about business processes, revenue growth, eliminating the company obstacles, and that sort of thing. But you ask the same framework of question is, you get to the point of, why change it now? You've been living with it for 5, 7 years. They will then tell you if there's an impending event, a future date, something that's dramatically changed that makes it now more urgent to change.
Right. So as we're going through this section of our Willing to Buy, like the justification evident, there are more questions that we're asking, or like.
Say that again, Charles. I didn't hear.
So as we're going through the justification evident, these are more organizational questions you're asking?
Yes.
So it may be with the same person, or could these be, up the chain of command, so to speak? Actually,
that's a great question. Willing to Buy is not for an organization, it's for an individual.
Okay.
If you have 4 people that you're dealing with and trying to get a decision done in an organization, you have 4 different Willing to Buy frameworks for each individual.
Okay.
Because what you want is their personal motivation and their view of the organizational motivation to do it. Their view of it.
Okay.
So it's an individual view. It's not one view for the organization. It's how does each contact view the impact on the organization in the justification evident. And in willing to buy, it's their unique one.
And that may be very different depending on where they are in the chain of command.
Also. That's exactly right. If I'm out on the production floor, let's say, I'm worried about production getting out the door and keeping my people busy. If I'm the owner of the business, I'm worrying about having enough cash flow from the people who bought my product to pay for new product and pay my people. So the justification evident for those two different people is different, but you can still assess their perception of the organizational urgency from their vantage point.
Gotcha. Okay. So give us some sample questions that you would ask in this section versus the willing to buy section.
Yeah. You would say, when let's say they give you, again, I'll say a billing problem. They just well, let's say an inventory problem. They have an inventory problem that they either stock out or they have an overabundance in the inventory, and they want to fix that, let's say. They want to have not stock outs. What you would say is, oh, really? Could you give me an example of what issues come up and have caused you for these stock outs or overabundance? They will then give you some examples. Well, one of our best customers, they wanted a product and we didn't have it because we stocked out and we didn't know, so they went to a competitor of ours. And that was a big customer, and we hate to lose any customer as a good customer. Once they tell you that, you say, well, how long have you been dealing with that? And so what you want to do is find out, again, what is their urgency to change this problem? It comes, Charles, from the idea that every business, every person, by the way, but let's say every business has multiple issues that they're trying to solve to make the business better, to grow revenue, to be more profitable. When they give you some issue, what you're trying to do is have them reflect on how important this issue is in the other business issues they're dealing with that they're trying to solve. And by asking them that question of how long they've been dealing with it, what if they tried to do to fix it, and what was the outcome, you can start hearing from them their own urgency. Okay. And not think you can change their urgency, or not let their mannerism say, we got to solve it now, we got to solve it now, we got to solve it now. Well, guess what? Only if they have a deep down urgency based on everything else they're dealing can you really determine whether this is a real thing that's going to happen or whether they're just trying to get information from you as a salesperson.
Okay. So just so I'm clear on these two phases on it. So willing to buy, that's just figuring out the reason why they're interested in your product or service, or engaging what their level of interest is.
Not interest. You're trying to assess what's compelling them. Interest is not a buying decision. Compelling reason, I've got to do it. I must do it. The closer you get to somebody must doing it rather than interested in doing it, the more likely you are to get a decision from them.
Gotcha. Okay.
Same with the organization, by the way. The same with the organization.
And so the justification evident, that's just verifying that desire that they have for the willing to buy is what's the word I'm looking for? Other than evident, but it's justifying that.
It's very tangible. Let me tell you, it's very tangible. Willing to buy is their motivation. They might not want to do it because their boss said, you better get this done or you may not be working here.
Right.
You can't ask that directly, but you're able to find it out. That's separate from getting control of their inventory. So it's two different. One is a personal impact.
Right.
Do I get a promotion? Do I get a raise? Do I get fired? Am I, what do I need to do to get this thing done that benefits me personally? Justification is what am I getting done for the business I'm working in, or the business I own, or the people I'm working with? What is that benefit? So there's two different urgencies, and you got to keep them separate.
Gotcha.
Because they're separate motivations.
Okay. So that moves us into part 3. So
and I will say, excuse me, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead. So we've got willing to buy, see the justification there for their desires. So now we're moving into part 3.
So let's assume we got the urgency. Remember I said willing to buy and justification evident fall under the component of urgency to make this decision, a personal and an organizational urgency. The other half of this, the two other components, are their decision capability. Meaning, let's say you found the urgency, but do they have enough money to pay for your product? Or can they find enough money? And who else do they need to get in the boat to get this done? So the two titles for that, the decision capability, are money available, MA, and decision cycle clear. Those are the terms I've used for years and years. Money available means that you ask them, when something like this occurs, when you look at situations like this, do you have a budget allocated to solve this issue that we've determined is urgent?
Right. Okay.
And we can talk more about how that, because a lot of people say, well, they won't just open their kimono because they'll think your proposal will be exactly the same as their budget. Well, we can talk about alternatives to that.
Okay.
But the second component of the decision capability is decision cycle clear, or DCC, which means how equipped are they, once they believe this is your solution is the solution, of getting it through their business and getting it approved.
Okay.
So those are the two components that will indicate to you, regardless of your solution, the likelihood that a decision will be made.
Okay, so let's talk about money available. So you were saying there are questions you can ask that can get people to reveal what that budget is. Because I know in my own personal experience, if you ask people like, well, what kind of budget or what type of investment are you looking at, they throw the question right back at you, well, how much is this going to cost? Because you don't want to reveal that because they think, as you said, it's going to be whatever their budget is. Whatever they reveal their budget is, come back. So walk us through ways of handling that.
Let me just make a little point. You're exactly right. People will do that. They don't want to reveal that. What most salespeople do, I found, the ones I've trained and all that kind of stuff, and I did it early on, is they either resist it, they want to give a lower price because they don't want to lose the prospect. So a little bit about this, and that's how I coach people, is you got to face that demon by asking the question this way. Charles, you just said, how much is this going to cost? And you could say, Charles, it's premature to give you an exact amount, but I believe it could run anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. Here's the key, two keys. Most times you can guesstimate how, within about 10 to 15%, what your solution is going to be. You want to make it on the lower end of the range you give them. That's number one. And after you give them the range, you want to say something like, does that feel comfortable to you, or should we stop here because it's not in the ballpark? That is a difficult sales. That's why it's taken some coaching in a lot of people. That's a difficult statement for somebody to make. But it comes from my experience that salespeople are afraid to ask that question that way. Therefore, they go, make a proposal, try to make a great presentation, and try to impress the prospect without knowing if they have any money, thinking that they'll be so excited about the solution they'll go get money. But my experience is a lot of times it doesn't work that way. 25–30% of the time, the people don't have the money to pay for what they're asking for. If you can ask that question and get it off the table earlier in your process, that is 20–30% of your prospects that you don't have to deal with, and allow you to work on the 70% who can find the money.
Right.
So that's how you approach money available. And Charles, you've asked questions. I'm trying to give you an example. This framework is an approach, and I'm glad to give examples of questioning. But in order to embrace it, you have to embrace it as an approach that you're helping the person through their decision-making process, and you're benefiting by being the observer and helping them through their decision-making process.
Right. So it's not a set standard questionnaire that you're asking. Very personalized, individual's product or service that they're inquiring about.
Yeah, and not only that, Charles, you're exactly right. It's not a pushy process. It's a very humble process that you can ask very good questions. And if people get mad at you for these questions, you're not doing it wrong. They're just conveying they haven't thought through and aren't ready to make the decision now, regardless of what they say. The reaction to the questions convey whether they're likely to make a decision.
Right.
And it leads us into the last component, which is decision cycle clear. And I abbreviate it DCC. After you know they have money, after you know you have urgency, some people in the organization actually don't know how to convince others that they have to convince to choose your solution. And even if you're selling to somebody who's a husband and wife, the husband might say, oh, this is wonderful. We need to put in that new bathroom. But you're dealing with him. You have no idea about how to convince her. Now, a lot of them, you bring both people in at the same time. I would advocate that's not always the best, because you don't get all of the individual information. So let's say, and some people would argue with me, let's say you're talking to a husband about doing a bathroom modification. And he says, this is wonderful. This is exactly what I would want. And you say, well, what you say is, that's terrific. Other than yourself, do you have to check with your wife? Is she involved in this decision? Oh, absolutely. Well, is she on the same page as you for the reasons to do the bathroom? Oh, I don't know. Well, what do you think we have to do for her, since you want to do it? What do we have to do for her so that it allows you to get your bathroom changed? So you see, the whole idea is, as you said, once you understand the urgency and they have the money, then you can engage the individual in a discussion to find out whether they know how to convince them. He might say, my wife always listens to me. She always have. We've renovated and she loves it. It's a done deal. Great. What other things have you done? Well, we did a kitchen. I came back. She loves it. Great. So then you can go to how long it's going to be till you talk to her. What would you like me to do next? So asking those questions allows them to convey to you whether they are in control of moving this decision through the group or organization they're involved with. Right.
So that's the letting them come to you as far as when they're ready to make this happen. It's giving you your actual.
That's right.
With it clear.
Yeah. The whole framework, as you and I appreciate the time on this, it is so humble, because we do not have to push anybody for anything other than clarification of why they're looking at a solution. Very gently, right. Under these components, why are they going to make a decision? What are the reasons? What are the components that have to be in place to make a decision?
Right. So I think when I first learned your whole process, Dan, that's what was so intriguing to me. Is with direct marketing, we're allowing customers to do that, and prospects to move themselves along the buying process on their own. We're encouraging it with a lot of the words we use, the copy, and who we're targeting. We already know a lot about them before we reach out to them. But your process, it does the exact same thing, just through the questions you're asking. It leads them to the decision on their own, based off of where they are in that life. That's why I find so similar to direct marketing, and the way you're letting people qualify themselves based off their own answers.
And Charles, I want to say you're so right in that, and we've talked many times on this, but it's not an either-or. If direct marketing, as you say, depending on the product and the solution, can identify the person, have them raise their hand, and have them buy without any human interaction, hallelujah, then that's what should happen. For the people that are watching this, who have to have a connection of a human being on the phone or person to person in order to make the deal happen, that's when Willing to Buy works as an adjunct and as a joint effort with direct marketing to get this done. Right over here on this table, I have a copy of the book. If you'd like me to show the book.
Not now, but
okay.
Before we get to that, as people are going through this process with those four different sections, where are the and they're in stage one. What's the biggest challenge they have at each stage and the overall process?
That's I'd like to answer it in reverse order.
Sure.
I've taught this. I developed it literally back in 1979 and 80. That's how long I've been doing this. Both, and it was in IBM where I did it, but inside IBM and outside, and I've taught it many times. The biggest resistance to this is between the ears of the salesperson. And it's because they're a human being who wants to demonstrate they bring value. And most people think they bring value by bringing a solution. In point of fact, Willing to Buy allows them to bring value because they're clarifying the problem in the mind of the buyer. The problem the buyer's trying to solve. Not the requirements, but the very reason why they even engaged in wanting to solve this in the future. That is not a simple task. It takes time because in the middle of asking these questions, little voices in most salespeople's brains say, you should be telling them an answer. You should be giving a solution. You should be answering things. They're going to think you're wasting your time. The exact opposite is true when you use this framework. So that's the first thing. It's an approach that is honestly open to this person you're talking to may not be a buyer right now. And you're trying to help them find out whether they want to be a buyer now. Now, back to the components. Willing to Buy feels, because it's personal, it can feel invasive to the salesperson. You can think I'm asking too personal questions and they're going to be offended. But the point is you're not asking for them to reveal questions that they aren't comfortable revealing. You're just asking them to expand on their assertions. For instance, I have to have this done. You're gently saying to them, what happens if you don't get it done?
Right.
Ask gently, it causes the person to think, why am I so urgent to get it done? They might quickly say, I've been dealing with this for so long, I've got to get it done. By saying, or else what, expands their point. But that's the difficulty with Willing to Buy. It feels like you're pressuring them when really what you're doing is making them think.
Right.
You're making them reflect on what brought them here. Now, justification evident. they've done a lot of studies. Anybody in a business who reaches out to somebody to solve something and thought about the problem, has tried different ways of solving it, and said, you know, I've got to go outside for a solution. So asking the same kind of questions about the business causes them to reflect on the path that brought them to asking for a solution today. What was the genesis of the problem? How long have you been dealing with it? What have you tried to fix? Why is it so urgent to fix this problem in your business now? The biggest difficulty is people will struggle with the answer because they're used to dealing with salespeople and giving them just requirements, and then salespeople respond to the requirements, kind of like a talking form, you know.
Right.
When you ask them the questions, you make them think back to the history of this problem. Now, the third component, money available. Most of us do not want to talk about money. Don't want to talk about sex, politics, religion, or money. Most of us don't. So we stay away from it. For what reasons? Well, the reason is if they tell us they don't have enough money, we got to go find somebody else. So in some ways, somebody talking to us makes us want to stay there because, oh my God, at least they're talking to us. That's what we're telling ourselves inside. By asking if they have that money, this is what the bracketing of the money is. And they say, whoa, that's an awful lot of money. You have the ability to gently say, then maybe the time is not right for you because this is what the money's going to take. Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult thing because it's a question that if you get a no answer, you know you're wasting your time. The whole willing to buy process, Charles, comes from the idea that the salesman's time is the most important asset they have. Right. And it helps, each one of these components help them recognize if they're spending time in the wrong place. Now, the final component, decision cycle clear. You may have run into people that are friends of yours. You may have done it. I did it early in my sales career. The prospect was so anxious to do it. He said, this looks good. I've got the budget. I thought, hot dog, I got an order. And all of a sudden, they go away. Why? Because they took it to their boss. They took it to their partner. They didn't condition their partner. They didn't think through it, and their partner says, we ain't going to do it. Their boss says, are you kidding me? So by asking this question of when a decision like this is made, Charles, who else is involved in it and who do you have to get on the same page, allows you to preempt and practice that with them and find out, do they really even know? Right.
So, well, the thing I really liked about your whole process when I first learned it was with direct marketing, we're always building relationships. And we're always trying to qualify people and let them self-select, you know, to the next level of customer. So whether it could be making another purchase, whether they're raising their hand and saying they're interested in this next level, you know, whatever product or service we're offering, we're trying to take them from suspect all the way to loyal customer and advocate customer. Your whole process, the spot, the question you're asking, and you seem to be the part of willing to buy is qualify people, so you can focus your efforts on the ones that are most qualified. And that same thing with direct marketing. That's why I thought they resonated so well together.
You know, Charles, if I may say, you and I have had conversations, and when you asked me to participate, which I was honored that you did, I said, for what? Something just popped in my mind. Direct marketing does hunt for pain points in the text, the dialogue, the graphics. It hunts for pain points to try to tap into the potential customers to see if they have that urgency and to get them to raise their hands.
Well, take that a step further. A lot of times we already know that urgency. We may not know the degree, but before we ever contact them, we know that urgency is there.
But you don't know the degree. That's right. That's
correct.
Right. You don't know
or an example of this is I was working with an artist one time, and they did murals. So how do we target as somebody we know that has an ability and desire to have this done. So, and look, businesses, and we need a lucrative market that's got a reason why, they've got the money to spend, and that we can reach them on a regular basis. So what we came up with was new moms. So first-time moms within the first 3 to 6 months of them knowing they're pregnant. If it's second-time moms, we find first-time moms that already know, they want to have their baby room done, they want a lot of expenses. So we have the buyer, we have a concrete deadline, but now let's have 100,000 revenue more. Now we know they've got the money to pay, so they're already triple qualified before we ever even send them any direct mail or however we contact them. So we're eliminating a lot of the moms that don't have the money, that don't have the concrete deadline. If it's a mom about to have her second or third kid, we knew that they didn't have the same desire as the first-time mom. So it wasn't good as far as peak customers, because once we did this, it was over. What it did give us a ton of new moms for the first time. So that was our lucrative market. We're eliminating people. If we ever contact questioning, you're doing stuff. You know, we still had to go make that personal sales call with this. That's where you would come in. You know, like the salesman would come in and say, "You know, you're qualified, but we still have to gauge the urgency, the desire." I hope I'm bringing these together some for us.
Yeah, well, here's if I can add, and then this is how we do all the time, Charles. You tap into that and do with direct marketing, do all that sorting as you've told me. So you know that exists. But as you know, people make an emotional decision to buy without even realizing, and then they set about justifying it tangibly.
Right.
The latency time between when you identify the person and you actually talk to them, even if it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, willing to buy allows you to re-inventory what you've already developed in direct marketing to re-emerge the emotion that they were ready to buy with. Mm-hmm. So you actually, the direct marketing does such a phenomenal job to getting the candidate that when you connect, I think that's what you're saying, I agree with you, when you connect with a person, this questioning framework allows you to re-energize that urgency from the data and knowledge you knew. Yeah.
And, you know, just because they're pre-qualified, we know they have the money, we know they're interested in a concrete deadline, we still have to engage desire. And that's what your question is. You know, that's what your people and how you question it allows us to gauge the desire. Are they willing to spend this money? Do they have to talk to the husband? We found targeting the mom, she's the one that made a lot of the decisions. So we knew we had that decision maker there. She may have to go justify the price for her husband, but if we could tap into her desires, we can normally pull him along. In a lot of cases.
Well, you know, I view this thing, because you mentioned earlier in this call, you're trying to assess interest. I think what we're doing is we're not trying to force it, but after you've teed them up with direct marketing, the willing to buy framework allows you to assess the difference between interest, desire, and passionate desire. Mm-hmm. The more you can ask them to go down that trail and not force them, but let them reflect and re-energize themselves in that desire component, the more likely they are to make a decision.
Yep.
And that's exactly what the framework does.
Yep. So that's the essence of why I asked you to do this, because the direct marketing there's a lot of generate revenue, close sales. But I find in so many cases, there is a sales component where you are on the phone talking and building relationships. Direct marketing is all relationships. Suspects. They have no idea who we are, what our business is. to get them to an advocate customer where they're telling everybody about us, having personal conversations, that's a lot of it. A lot of times. So.
Well, like I said, it's simple but not easy, but it is effective, and then that's been my experience over the time I've developed it.
Yep. So tell us about the book and where they can buy that, or is there a website we can go to?
Well, let me disappear quickly. I'll be right back. Sorry for that. There's the book.
Very cool. So where can they learn more about this?
Well, this is on Amazon right now in a Kindle version,
Okay.
a Kindle version, and a hard copy version.
Okay. Very cool.
You can go to willingtobuy.net. Willingtobuy.net
Okay.
will then give you more information on that. But if you really want it, it's a quick read. It's less than 100 pages, but it explains a lot more slowly and logically all the components of Willing to Buy. And from this, you'll begin to start trying it. You can begin to start trying it yourself.
That's awesome, man. Well, I know since you and I met a couple years ago, I guess it's been now, that just in our conversations with combining our direct marketing with the sales, I know as I'm meeting people now and assessing and gauging where they are, I reflect on these same four modules that you go on, and I always don't know where I am strategically in each section. I know them well enough to where I can start gauging. And I don't look at it as 1, 2, 3, 4 like you do. I'm not anywhere near that level. I just try to gauge, like, based off of each one, where they are to help me decide if they're even making a proposal.
And that's what I found. And the only reason it's not something I bought. It's not something I tried to shove down anybody's throat. Like I said, I'm scar tissue from neck to ankle. And what it really does is you can start it a little bit. It's never over. It's like an exercise program. As long as you embrace the whole idea of questioning for urgency, to allow them to reflect on their own desire to make this decision. You use the word desire. You can't go wrong with it, even if you're a neophyte in it or you're an expert in it, because you're always honing it, and it's really a helping. As I always say, I want to turn sales into a helping profession. This helps people sort out the decisions they really want to make.
Very cool. So, well, Dan, I know we're running short on time, so I just want to say for participating in the summit. I can't thank you enough for doing this. Your whole process has been so intrigued. I've talked to a bunch of different salesmen, and you're the only one that's articulated to me the exact same process we do with direct marketing through your.
Well, we have made that connection.
Me the most, man. So anyway,
it's my pleasure and honor to be here, and thanks for including me, Charles.
Hey, Dan, thank you so much.
Okay, bye.